What's up, everybody? Des the Mess back once again. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. And today we're going to find out what Blink 182, conspiracy theories, and the last time I tripped on acid all have in common. If you haven't figured it out yet, it's the big topic of the week: aliens. So, I find it very interesting that Congress had a hearing. At this point, it was yesterday because I'm doing this recording on Thursday, the 27th, but the video will be released on the 29th of July. I was not going to do a video about aliens. I was going to talk about something else. Funnily enough, a friend of mine sent me a video about a craft that apparently flew over somewhere in Las Vegas a couple months ago and crashed. And just, I don't know if it was coincidental or part of the aftermath of that, but some whistleblowers from the Navy and an intelligence agency in the U.S. government had a congressional hearing yesterday. That was Wednesday the 26th at this point, about aliens and UFOs. And the basic summary of that was that we are being misled, right? The public is being misled and uninformed about the potential of alien existence. One of the questions that really stuck out to me that I want to highlight, the interviewer asked, I don't remember any of their names, but the interviewer asked the one guy if we had proof of alien life, and he said something to the effect of that non-human biologics were recovered from a crash. So, if that is true, and I'm not throwing my eggs into one basket right now, but if that is true, it means there's an intelligent species in the universe besides human life that in some way is trying to communicate with us, if they're not doing so already. What I'm not going to do is get wrapped up in conspiracy theories, because I'm no longer a conspiracy theorist. But that does bring me into the foundation of my beliefs in aliens and where that comes from. I watched X-Files as a young kid. I was a little bit too young to understand everything that was going on, but in a broad way, it gave me the skeptical conspiracy theory sort of mindset that a child or teenager would have, that gave me, or that led me to believe in aliens, UFOs. I also believed in Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and a couple other things. I'm not going to touch on all of that because I'm going to stick to the topic. But in all of this, I have never not believed in aliens pretty much since I knew what aliens were. As I got older, I began to understand that maybe some of the things that I believed surrounding aliens weren't necessarily true. And I'm gonna touch on a couple of those things. So one of the biggest conspiracy theories is that human life was started and or heavily influenced by alien gods who came to Earth. The one I used to believe in was a theory about the Anunnaki, that they came to Earth, they were alien gods, they experimented on early humans, gave us a spike in intelligence, they forced us into slave labor, they had us build monuments and do resource gathering for what they called monoatomic gold. The idea was they needed it to power their crafts, and if they consumed this monoatomic gold, it would promote long life, better, it's like a hypervitamin. Like, you're comparing monoatomic gold to the way that we consume things like magnesium and iron, which are metals, but they're good for us in vitamin level consumption. So that was kind of the idea, right? There is some truth in eating or consuming, I really don't want to call it eating, but consuming metals, right? That, like, that stuff is good for us in a very specific dosage. If we can figure that out, there's some health benefits to that sort of stuff. Electricity is conducted very easily through gold. So the idea was, if you're eating or consuming monoatomic gold, it would speed up your neural processes because your brain runs on electricity, so forth. And as a late teen, early 20-something, I was all in on that. I used to watch a lot of Ancient Aliens. That stuff kind of weirds me out now because, to make a long story short, I realize there's a lot of racism and anti-Semitism in Ancient Alien theory, some of which seems benign or it's less in your face, right? It's like kind of accidental racism in some ways, but it's still racist nonetheless. The idea that, like, aliens built the pyramids it's funny in the way that white people who don't understand how a group of not white people could have constructed something like the pyramids, or the same sort of temples in South America and Mexico, just because they're all shaped in a similar way. The idea, I think, is that blocks shaped that way, stacked on top of each other, are just a pretty stable design, especially when they didn't have the technology like we do to build things like skyscrapers. So they worked with what they had. There's debate about how they constructed those things, and I think that's proper, and we can, study that further. But to suggest that because white people didn't do it, it must have been aliens, you can see why there's a racist undertone to that, and then it loses its humor. So, that being said, no, I don't believe aliens built the pyramids. Maybe I kind of believe that there could have been a time in human history where extraterrestrials visited us, and that could have influenced early, cultures' ideas of godhood and spirituality, because if that happened, they wouldn't have understood entirely that extraterrestrials were visiting us, and they would worship, I don't know who said it, but there's a famous quote about how the ideas of magic are totally indistinguishable from science if you have a civilization that's advanced enough. If you went back to the 1950s and told them that you had a box in your hand that you could communicate to anybody with, they would either think you're nuts or think you're magic. And when you tell someone in 2005 that smartphones would exist, I think they did at that point. I'm dating myself as far as my memory is concerned. The point is, technology's advanced really fast, really quickly over the last 70-something years. So telling someone in the 50s or even the 80s, even the early 90s, I think, that cell phones would be as big of a thing as they are, right? Imagine in the 90s when people had, those really chunky cell phones after the 80s when they used to be in briefcases and stuff, but they had the chunky ones and people were using beepers and stuff. If you told someone that eventually they would basically have a supercomputer in their hand and that everyone would use it to argue with each other, they would either think you're insane or have a good laugh about it at the very least. So the point is, right, technology that has advanced so far, if you were to show that or try to explain that to someone, whether that was through time traveling, if that was a possibility, I'm not going to touch that, or to, another civilization that just hasn't gotten to that point, they would be completely baffled and blown away by it. As far as I'm concerned, there's no conclusive evidence to suggest that humans and extraterrestrials have interacted in the past. But the idea that this congressional hearing happened the other day and that, supposedly the Pentagon is covering up, because of course they're going to deny this. But if high profile, intelligence and Navy personnel are coming out and saying that they've spoken to people and or witnessed things themselves, I'm going to err on the side of caution, but still more than likely believe that we can't be alone in the universe. It's just too fucking big. There is so much space, and if we're the only ones who are here, then that's... the chance that we're the only living things is impossible. And whether or not something else that's, exists in the universe is intelligent and more intelligent than us, if they could visit us, I really wonder why they would. I am on the side of, if a civilization, an entire intelligent species was traveling the stars, there's one of two possibilities, right? There's the hyper positive one, and then there's the hyper negative one. And the positive one is they are so scientifically advanced that they've solved all of the problems with their civilization, or most of them, to the point that something like capitalism wouldn't exist, as, whatever their economic system is that would be comparative to ours. And everyone would be taken care of, right? There'd be little to no disease, everyone would be housed, and they would be, focused on science as a civilization. That would be their goal, is like, congratulations, we figured out all the problems on our planet, now we're going to explore the greater universe to the best of their ability as an advanced civilization. The other possibility, which is the negative one, is that they are hyper-fascistic, militaristic. They've exploited the living fuck out of their planet, and they're looking into other options. If that were the case, and we were being contacted in any way by that sort of civilization, they just would have destroyed us already, because they would have wiped us to take whatever resources they could from our planet. I don't think they would play the long con and infiltrate us the way that conspiracy theories tend to play it out, right? The idea that there are aliens living in underground bases or underwater bases at the bottom of the ocean, or that reptile people have infiltrated the government because they're shapeshifters. I believed some of that in my early 20s. I do believe there are underground facilities that the government's using to experiment in ways that are totally unethical, and if the public found out about them, that would be one thing. Whether or not extraterrestrials are involved is a whole can of worms that I don't have time to discuss here, and I'm also not going to buy into it, because again, that goes back to these racist and anti-Semitic tropes. There is a really good website that, if I can find the link to it, I found it in my early 20s, and this is what kind of started bringing me away from my conspiracy theory and right-wing in general thinking. But it broke down that the conspiracy theories about reptile people in the government is all an anti-Semitic trope, right? It starts with Nazis, basically. It starts with the imagery of Jews being like snakes and reptile people. So it's all code words. And unfortunately, that gets disseminated into conspiracy theories, which are then eaten up by naive people, such as myself in my early 20s, who don't realize that they're eating up anti-Semitic dog whistles. They're literally just digesting Nazi dog whistles and then spewing them back at other people, ignorantly, not realizing they're furthering fascist talking points. And when I was able to break all of that down and understand that, on one hand, I would be like, yeah, man, fuck Nazis. Like, Nazis are an obvious target for most people except Nazis to hate. I'm pretty sure anybody who's like, yeah, Nazis might be okay, they're already a Nazi and they're trying to fool you. Everybody else seems to be anti-Nazi. The problem, though, of course, like I said, is when you don't realize that the things that you're saying are actually furthering a Nazi agenda. And that's where I was in my early 20s by regurgitating all these conspiracy theories I believed in. I'm getting a little off track, but I wanted to touch on that specifically because it's super important to recognize when we talk about extraterrestrials, UFOs, the idea of alien intervention on the human race. I think it's super important to recognize that a lot of this discussion can get convoluted and can come from a place of hatred. And it's not everyone who's talking about aliens and extraterrestrials is actually talking about them, and that's important to recognize. But also, not everyone who talks about aliens has good intentions anyway. You know, there are cults devoted to the idea that aliens will come and, I don't know, kind of rapture people, basically. I know there were a couple in the 90s and 80s that did that. Again, I'm not going to touch on all of that. I wanted to focus more on the idea that aliens probably do exist. If they're communicating with our governments, I think it's really hard to believe, right? I think it's more likely that governments have recovered spacecraft that have tried to communicate with us and were either shot down or crashed or something. But also, if a civilization had enough technology to be able to travel here from another galaxy or solar system, like further off, they would probably be able to do it undetected. I don't really think they would just be flying around in plain sight. I would think that they would have some sort of camouflage and some way to not be detected. You know, there's concerns about how there's just constant radio signals coming from outer space, and some of that could be stars and other unexplained space phenomena. But, you know, all of this stuff really does interest me. I'm just not an expert on it. I used to watch a lot of Ancient Aliens and get stoned, and it freaked me out. I used to be really into alien conspiracies to the point that I got very paranoid and thought that eventually, like, the government would come for me because I knew too much, because I kept finding all these, you know, weird back end sites basically that's like, oh, you don't know about this? Here's a link to this other site that you never heard of. And each of those sites gets more and more dense, right? You're just jumping down a rabbit hole head first until your neck breaks. Thankfully, I caught on to something and started climbing out before I got in too deep, because who knows where I would have been if I didn't. So, this brings me to the fun part, I'll say, of the video, where I want to talk about my experience with extraterrestrials. Are you ready? Because this is going to be heavy. I've never had an actual experience with extraterrestrials that I know of. You know, I don't know if I believe people have been abducted and experimented on. What I can say is that's not true, the second time I ever dropped LSD, I had a dissociative episode where I thought I was being experimented on by extraterrestrials. And that's the point that I wanted to talk about here. Was my experience with aliens is largely due to the fact that I was taking hallucinogens. So I have done acid 12 times, exactly a dozen, over the course of, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. So I did it maybe twice a year. And I haven't done acid since 2018 when I got in trouble and I first got sober. That was the last time I took acid. I saw aliens in that trip too. So out of the 12 times that I did it, 9 of them involved extraterrestrials. And I think that's pretty high, right? I think a lot of that was, again, my conspiracy theory brain unraveling. a lot of times when people do hallucinogens, if they dissociate or have very vivid trips, some people will call them like a bad trip. I wouldn't call it a bad trip. I looked at it as an experience. I needed to learn something about myself that I was hiding or unafraid to face. Acid is partially responsible for me coming to terms with my queerness. Acid and mushrooms both helped me connect with a deeper sense of empathy and appreciation and love for the friends that I have. So I don't think it's all been bad, even the quote-unquote bad trips. So that being said, the first time that I saw aliens on acid, I was at a friend's house and I, took my acid and we're just hanging out and watching goofy shit on TV and listening to music, getting stoned, whatever. And at one point I dissociated and had this whole experience where I closed my eyes and in my mind, the projection that I was experiencing, I was hooked up to some sort of a machine. And I realized I was literally only an eyeball and there was just this very, very realistic looking alien speaking to me telepathically. So they're not moving their mouth, right? It's literally just staring at me, and it had this very eerie voice, and it just said, "You are an eye. You are that which sees. You need to go back." And it just kept influencing me in this way that I'd seen too much, and I know too much about this experience that I was having. And it freaked me out because I'm young and I'm doing a hallucinogen. So I opened my eyes in this, right, what I believe is real life, we'll say. And then I closed them again and I'm back there. And it freaked me out because I couldn't stay in one place or the other. If I closed my eyes, I was there, and if I opened my eyes, I was here. But in both cases, I was being told my eye was open, and I'm seeing too much in one world, and I'm on my friend's couch, watching It's Always Sunny, basically, with my friends. And that freaked me out because I didn't understand what was reality, and it flipped a switch in my brain. So the government, the U.S. government, I should say, I don't know if that's true around the world, but the U.S. government considers someone clinically insane if they have done LSD 2 times or more in their lifetime. So if you did it once at 16 and you did it once at 75, you're clinically insane according to the government. I think that's bullshit. I think it's ableist. I think it's classist. I think there's a lot of nonsense involved in that classification. I also think it's rooted in like the early 40s and 50s when they started experimenting with LSD in a clinical way and realize it just made people goofy. I also think dosage has a lot to do with that. Point is, I'm probably a little crazy. I don't know if acid made me that way. I just whatever, I've got mental illness, I've had trauma, I've got a lot of other stuff going on that I don't think acid is the reason that I would be insane if I were to be labeled such. So I've done acid a dozen times, as I said. The second time that I did it, I saw aliens. I don't remember what order this is all in, but there was another time where the same sort of thing happened. I was kind of in like a spaceship, like looking out. There was another experience I had where I was just locked in a room and I couldn't see anything outside of it. I just knew that I wasn't like in this body. The last time that I did acid, I remember for sure, I felt like I was being driven around in like an alien car, basically, on another planet, being told by the 2 aliens in the front seat, I guess, that it doesn't matter what drugs I'm doing because they're all the same, and I'm just killing myself slowly. And it made me really paranoid because every time that I was doing acid and I would have these dissociations, they were getting more vivid and they were getting too close to, you know, me on the inside, basically. They were really pulling at my sense of self, basically. It was really weird. It was really fucking weird. You know, it's trigger warning. So if you are watching this video, I'm gonna tell you to mute, and when you see my hands go like this, it means the trigger warning is done, and I'm done talking about this. So get ready to mute in 3, 2, 1. The last time that I did acid and I was in this back seat of the alien car, or whatever was really going on, you know, I'm hallucinating, so who the fuck knows? I was being molested, and I know that wasn't happening in real life because I was by myself. I was in my own car tripping on acid. That was a bad idea of itself. But to my knowledge, that didn't happen in real life because I was locked in my car by myself. No one else was around. Trigger warning's done. So, you know, that was happening, and I felt so just violated, and like, that's not who I am, and that's not what's really happening. But as someone who's now done acid at that point in my life a dozen times, I really stopped believing what was real and what wasn't, what counted as reality. I am somewhat solipsistic, and that can be dangerous. That can be extremely dangerous for someone like me. I have really bad anxiety, so I can get paranoid, and it's heightened even worse when I get depressed. And when I start feeling depressed and anxious and my paranoia kicks in, I start believing other people don't exist and that the entire world is some sort of a matrix, basically, that I'm, you know, potentially an eyeball hooked up to a machine that aliens are experimenting on, or a brain in a vat, or Neo from the Matrix without all the cool superpowers. And that sucks. That really sucks to think that, you know, I have fits where I don't think my friends exist, and I don't think people who care about me exist, because I'm like, you're just a figment of my imagination. I saw a post the other day that I kind of liked in that vein. That was, you know, someone was saying, like, they're really solipsistic, and, you know, they're like, if everything is made up, then, like, you're one of the best things that I could have thought of. And I thought that was really cool, right? Like, do I really think my friends don't exist? I don't know. That's really heady, and that's maybe a topic for another conversation, but I've done acid enough times to give me a serious sense of doubt about what is reality and what isn't. At this point, I would like to believe that reality is me playing Dark Souls or Skyrim on a day off and playing guitar and sitting here making a YouTube video, and that it's not being experimented on and prodded by aliens in places that probably don't exist. And then there's an argument to be made that none of this actually exists, and there's further layers, and that's just too much. So all of this is to say, aliens exist. They're definitely out there. The government probably knows about them. The government probably is not directly communicating with alien species. If they are, I am really confused. I'll say that. I think it's more than likely that if we have recovered alien craft and alien remains, that it was some sort of accident, and, you know, there might be an argument to be made that we've reverse engineered some of their stuff. I don't believe that they're living in underground bases. I don't believe there are shapeshifters running the government. I really think it's disgusting that anyone thinks that Jewish people are aliens, and I'm going to make a really long video in the future about conspiracy theories and what I used to believe and what I learned to come out of it, and how all of that stuff is very dangerous. You know, some of it seems benign and some of it is really terrible. But, you know, whatever. I believe in aliens. I don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to believe that. I think Tom DeLonge is a goofball. I am excited for the future as far as maybe more whistleblowers coming out and talking about different things. Maybe my video here will be proven a little bit wrong in some of the points that I've made. I don't really know. I want truth. I want truth over everything, and sometimes it's really scary. You know, I think the truth is scary, but I think what's scarier is thinking we're alone in the universe. I really hope civilization that's contacting us is not as bad as we are, because we're pretty awful to each other as a human race. You know, and that's not individual to individual. That is from the top down. We're doing pretty awful as a humanity. So anyway, glad that you're here for this journey with me, whether you're an alien or whether you exist or not, whatever. Check out my social media links in the description below. I'm gonna drop my Venmo and my Cash App. Send me a couple bucks. I really enjoy making these talks. I'm trying to make a video a week. It's kind of a lot for me. I'm making a schedule and setting routine for myself, and so far keeping to it. That's pretty exciting. Gonna keep pumping out content. I've talked to a few folks. I'm gonna try to get guest speakers on to do different things, so that will be coming up. Eventually I want to have it so I can say, hey, we're going to be talking about such and such a subject next week. Also, not sure if you noticed, this will be my first video in 1080 because I figured out how to set up my webcam correctly, so that's exciting. Gonna keep doing that. Still looking for a good green screen that's in the right price range that I can set up behind me and, you know, potentially do cool stuff with that. There's lots to look forward to. If you are not currently, please subscribe to my channel, follow me on the socials, give me some money, comment below if you liked what I had to say, if you want to add to the discussion, if you think I missed or misrepresented anything, let me know. Excuse me. I love this. I love all of the topics that I want to talk about. I have so many ideas for how to grow this channel on a philosophical, psychological, spiritual level, and I'm excited to share that with all of you. So once again, if you are not already subscribed, please do so. Let me know what you think. What are your experiences with aliens? Are you an alien? Are you my NSA agent who's tracking me and making sure I'm not saying the wrong things? Will there be a red dot on my forehead? That might be taking it too far. Anyway, that's all you're going to hear from me. Check out my other videos if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.